Good afternoon and welcome to episode 68 of Apex Instant Tips. I'm Anton. If I remember right, we come to you every Friday at 12:05 Eastern Time. And usually we talk about Apex, hence the name. Today's tip, as you may have guessed from the topic, involves the Apex standards tracking application. And we have an expert in that as a special guest today. You may have guessed it. Our special guest is Hayden. Welcome back to the show, Hayden. We're always happy to have you as a guest.
Yeah, I thought I could stop by to deliver what I think is a valuable tip.
Well, I have to say this tip, which we're going to get to in a second, is it really exploits what I like most about Apex. And there are so many things I like, but one of it is that Apex is just metadata driven. And I'm a data guy, but what's better than data is metadata. And we're going to dig into the metadata of Apex, but also the metadata of the database itself.
Absolutely, yes. I'm very excited about this, and I'm hoping that I can inspire other people to join us in helping us to explore some possibilities.
Right. And so the topic is scope creep in a good way.
That's right, but it should be called PLScope creep. And without further ado, perhaps we should share my screen.
Yeah, let's do it. So,
Excellent.
So PLScope creep inside the Apex standards application. What do we have going on?
That's right. Yeah. So I'll put the spotlight on you, Anton, and I'll go ahead and start this timer. Do you see anything on my screen that jumps out as you as perhaps unexpected for the so-called application standards tracker?
I do. It looks like you've got something at the bottom right called database object standards, which is beyond the scope of Apex for sure.
That's right. So I want to inspire people to use the application standards tracker with some revisions that I've added to the application to also take a look at PLScope standards. So PLSQL standards rather. Anton, what is a PLSQL standard that you might have?
I was thinking about some database type standards, but you're right. The harder ones are the ones that are PLSQL standards. So like digging into naming conventions, like maybe every global should be G underscore, something like that.
Right. And I have some naming conventions being asserted here. So one standard that I thought would be useful would be variables in the package spec are forbidden. So you might not have the same standard, but it's one that I thought would be good.
Right. You don't want you want to allow constants in the package spec, but not variables in the package spec. That's definitely a valid one. Interestingly, though, a lot of times it might be okay. So I like that you've got the mark as valid built right in.
Yeah. So if you want to check if this is okay, you can click the fail button. It'll take you to the underlying database object, and you also get the line number here. So this is line 182. And I don't know what you'd be looking for here, but maybe you'll decide, okay, well, this is a valid exception to the rule, so I'll just mark this as valid.
Right, and I see another column there that's the legacy. So I guess that's like you're just not going to look at it for now, but you're not saying it's valid. Is that it?
Yeah. I think if you're introducing standard tracking to an existing body of code, it can be overwhelming. And so maybe you just want to focus on new code. And so maybe you want to say for this series of packages, I'm just going to select everything and bulk mark everything as legacy. And so that means, and this is an innovation that I've added, that means it's not right or wrong. I'm not saying that it's not a violation of the standard. I'm just saying we're going to deprioritize it, and we're going to prioritize new code.
I love it. So we've got fail, we've got mark it valid, we've got mark as legacy. But the thing that's really interesting to me is before I learned about PLScope, I would have had a crazy parsing of the actual package spec to come up with this validation. How do you write this validation using PLScope? And what is PLScope?
That's right. So for people who want to explore PLScope as a primer, I advocate that they visit livesql.oracle.com and they Google PLScope. There are a bunch of primers, mainly written by Stephen Feuerstein, no less. And yeah, so we won't cover that in the space of 5 minutes, but I'll give the following. My SQL developer startup script has this as an ultra session statement, which inputs all of my data in a series of tables, user identifiers, which will break down all of my PLSQL variables into an easily referenceable structured table and user statements. So these are my execute immediates, my DML statements. And the alternative, which would be to query a user source, would be so much more procedurally intensive, because if you have a line break in your execute immediate, it might be harder to find, for example.
Right. So I'm going to jump in with PLScope is a database feature. When you enable it, every time you compile a package, it fills in these views, user identifiers, user statements. There's about a half dozen views that you then get populated with all this kind of information. I love it.
That's right. And then you can write queries like, and let me pick the naming convention standard one by way of example, where you query the user identifiers table and you go down your logic. So if the user type is a constant and it's in the package spec, then I would expect that it should either begin with a G underscore or GC underscore, otherwise deliver the error message. Package specs constants must be prefixed with G underscore GC underscore. So essentially you translate your standards into a query similar to this that ultimately spells out the various issues that you might have.
Right, and this is completely analogous to what you would do for the APEX metadata queries that you would write for the standards tracker. So I love it.
That's right. So and the universe of standards that people have out there is probably limitless, and which is why I have published this as a public project that I would love for people to join me in collaboration on. So so far, I only have one collaborator, and that's you. So.
Well,
Yeah,
hey,
so
I think we've hit our tip right at 5 minutes. If people really just came for 5 minutes, they should beat it now, because that's all we're going to take your time. But don't forget to do all those things like subscribe, smash the bell, call your mom. But let's continue on this topic and talk about how they can get it, what it is, and how they can contribute, which is what I'm really interested in.
Yeah, so I'm open to whatever the comfort level of the contributor is. I will work with that, because I want ideas. I want ideas for new views and new standards to check for, because some of the SQL might not be so self-evident, and people will have clever ideas for how to go about it. So find me on Twitter. I'll add you as a collaborator, or just contact me on Twitter and let me know what standard you would check for, and then we can continue the conversation that way.
Right. And Hayden, can you just open up one of these views? Because what I think would be ideal would be for people to submit queries that look like one of these views that you have here. So this is your repository. This is a view. If somebody looks at this and they think, okay, I can write a view for another standard, all they would have to do is give you their query and a description of what it checks for, and we could add it to the repository. And the next time somebody downloads the application, they can choose to include this as their own standard, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So let's work on this together and build something that is a must-have for any project.
Yeah, I think this is really fantastic. I'm looking forward to contributing some more to this myself, because I think there's a lot that could go here.
I think one thing I'll say for this is once you get in the frame of mind of using, of translating the standards that you care about into SQL queries against the APEX metadata, it becomes a frame of mind. So I would speculate that about a third of the APEX tips that we've ever delivered would translate to something that should be an addition to the APEX standard tracker.
You know, maybe I'll get some folks at Insum to start contributing in that way. Go back through an instant tip and say, hey, how could this be a standard, and do that. I love it. And today's tip really was PLScope. And I want to say, in very much the same way, I've really only started, I've known about PLScope, but I've really only started using it since you and I have had discussions about it. And now it's just, you know, where I used to try and parse, I used to parse through user underscore source text and all this. now I use the user identifiers and the other user statements. And the user statements even has like the SQL ID. It's a lot of great information coming out of PLScope that I really hadn't realized was so valuable.
Completely. And I am also learning about it as I write this. So there are all sorts of features that the upper limit of what we can achieve is yet to be discovered.
Absolutely. Well, that really covers it from my wisdom of the week as well. And because I think my wisdom really there is that metadata is king, right? I mean, data is great, but metadata is even more impressive what you can do with it. That's definitely my takeaway. I don't have anything else, Hayden. How about you?
No, I say we give people back their Fridays.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you again, Hayden, for being our special guest. We hope that you'll have an opportunity to join us again.
Oh, who knows?
All right. Do all the things. Thanks, everyone.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.